So, so this book happened as a result. A friend of mine asked me to write some essays about how punk rock had actually sort of influenced my poetics over the years. And I sat down to write them, and I got horribly stuck. I couldn't write anything. And I decided that I would teach a class at the Art Academy of Cincinnati, where I normally teach, where I would use punk rock lyrics as a sort of lens for looking at literary works of various stripes. And the class got really heated and wound up, and it was this sort of act of creation and destruction at the same time, kind of like a punk rock show. And I would come home and just be so amped up, and I would start writing these poems, and I would literally sit down and start typing and wake up later typing with pages of stuff. And at the same time, my father was doing sort of genealogy work on our family history, and it turns out that my great-great-great-grandfather, the Reverend James Hart of the Folsomville, Indiana General Baptist Church for 50 years, stipulated in his will that at his funeral he should be stood up at the pulpit in his coffin with his eyes open, staring at the congregation. And they did this, and people passed out in the aisles. And this was like, 1850 or 1860 something. And I remember it suddenly occurring to me that being, a punk rock singer, or a hellfire and brimstone preacher, or a really dynamic lecturer, or whatever, I mean, those things aren't really very different from each other. And I've always wanted poetry readings to be sort of more like a punk rock show, and somehow, like, all of that got wound up into the poems that are in this book. So I'm going to not read from this book for a minute. I always like to give the explanation of sermons and lectures after it happens. So Justin asked me to read this poem from Wolfface that takes John Clare the romantic poet John Clare as a source. And most of you probably know, like, John Clare was a very, very troubled poet who actually thought there were blue devils hanging out of the ceiling with long claws that were trying to rip his head off. So he walked around like this, trying to avoid them, and actually eventually wound up with a hunchback because he was so afraid of them. And he wrote this brilliant poem called Lines, I Am, where he talks about being like vapors tossed into the nothingness of scorn and noise, which just sounds so much like a Sonic Youth song. I think he's just such a contemporary poet. So I made this poem by stealing lines from John Clare. So it's a cento. It's made up almost entirely of John Clare's lines, but I did take liberties where I felt like I wanted to. So this is called Lines, I Am, not John Clare. I am a barker by profession. I am a badger with a touch. I lean upon the windowsill and view the world as a pheasant sick dream. I wish to be or not, or else always to remember thee. The mouthful of worms, the unhinged trees, puttocks, buzzards, etc. I envy them their wings. I wish the devil luck. In Allen's madhouse, caged and living in mellow shades no pencil e'er conveys, the bookman eats grass, then kicks. Poesy is over the wall. Poesy's power overpowering sweet. I love, at long last, the breakneck hills. I love to hear the evening crows. I sit on a bench in June, ensnared and pleased in my loneliness. I long to stay forever. I snap the air with my solid gold head. Unequaled raptures, happiest happinesses. So as I mentioned, I teach at the Art Academy of Cincinnati, so my students are painters and sculptors most of the time, and I often will ask them to keep sketchbooks about the things that we're reading. So rather than having them write journal entries, I ask them to respond to the things that we're reading in terms of marks and lines. And the first time I did it, I remember that I picked the sketchbooks up, and I was just like, how the fuck am I going to grade these? There was no plan. So I wrote all the students' poems in response to their sketchbooks. And a lot of the poems happen as a result of, like, you know, sort of opening the sketchbook and sort of flipping through it and then focusing in on one thing and describing that, and the poems came out of that description. So this is a poem that started as a description of a drawing to one of the students. It's called Electron Face. It's true that two hummingbirds singing in exactly the same pitch can shatter the blackest of mountains. But it's also true that the missiles in those mountains can shatter a hummingbird to pieces of hummingbird. The end. But this curled mess of black yarn, this series of concrete barrier entanglements, means that we have to be ready for no matter what. For whatever might befall us. Hummingbirds, missiles, those drugged out runway models. I'm telling you, man, we know each other like we know the ghosts knowing each other. And I'm so fucking grateful I could fly a kite about it. This terrifying state of the seasons. This half-baked smell of church. I lurch forward to go backward, awkward to go on the record. I just can't get over those blues at the window and the tiny bit of yellow like cats' teeth spitting sparks. How lucky we are to have light. How marvelous to scribble over fate. The reason it's good to have faith is the reason for everything good. So I'm going to finish up with just a couple more from the sermons here. Once upon a time before, happily ever after, I came to dance, but I ended up quitting. At least it seems like that's what happened, what was and what was happening. A natural disaster. The iffy architecture, the throatless opera singer, and your pelvis on the beach. 40 starfish in the sun sort of breathing, and tomorrow always yearning our thesaurus to extinction. The dead boys and the flesh eaters. This autobiographical marigold teeth, this may be something shriller. Some notes on notation, a slide presentation, a philosopher's midnight in a cellar drinking cognac. Darby crashes suicide, my blood brother, sister. Aphoristic, heavy water, happy, stupid, sniffing glue. People nowhere better than the place they started breathing. Let there be honey. The body starts its failing with the shadows falling lightly, clangy folding metal chairs. The lovely untold story with its view of something different. Not better or greener, but happier and meaner. I do everything with you. And even when I don't, there's some beer in the fridge. I'm home. Are you home? It's amazing. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm super thrilled to get to do this. Thanks, you guys. Cool. No performing animal eagle. The snow, the now, the people come around, stop loafing in the ether. rhetorical bombs, launching and lofting metaphorical missiles, distortions of the facts which laid out rightly are all and inclusive. Nobody's grip comprehensive, but all of us living and drinking, loving and wallpaper, fucking the totality as we are, it's it. Don't wait for the map of human being. Might as well wait on the corner for some flowers to appear from the mouth of a stranger with a briefcase, cutting cocaine against a window, or a stranger with a stranger haircut, wearing combat boots and breathing anarchy state and utopia, Robert Nozick. Might as well read Devil in the Morning and Heaven After Supper. Today I feel, or rather I felt something eager, but then as an afterthought I got up and figured something out. More similar than different. I want to include you in the electrical circuit, in the electrical socket we plug each other into, emergency convulsions, which is getting acquainted, which is forming a new, more inspirited constellation in the shape of being together, reading and writing our separate but similar and sexy green books on how the earth is getting warmer. So we take off its clothes and our clothes, and nothing seems to help except weeping in the icebox, but cars get between us, and religions get between us, and politicians especially make a living of between us, of for and against us, of weapons and races and beards versus beardless, and blacks versus witless, racist bastards versus all of us. We gotta stop making so damn many distinctions. The fabric of America frayed all around the edges, frayed even in the center. The new Black Panthers and the dopey white answers and the drill baby drillers, the foreign investors, all my balls in the air. It's a wash. Gravity calls. So I'm calling for a blending. Not into the scenery, but into each other, toward a common understanding. What ails us, and what us is all. We face each other to answer each other. We begin by shaking hands, or with some other greeting. We sit at the table and we listen. Thank you.